Struggling single dad finds injured pilot in storm unaware. She'll make his daughter's dream soar. Storm rolled in like a freight train, angry and relentless. Trees bowed under howling winds. Rain hammered the tin roof of the old farmhouse, and thunder cracked like warning shots over the hills of rural Kentucky. Inside, James Carter, a widowed single dad, stoked the fire and checked the window for the 10th time that hour. His 8-year-old daughter, Lila, sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing airplanes in her sketch pad. "One day I'm gonna fly," she said, holding up her newest sketch. "Just like Mommy did." James forced a smile. His late wife had been a flight instructor before the accident. Since her death, he'd worked odd jobs: mechanic, farmhand, janitor, doing whatever it took to raise Lila. Money was always tight. Her dream of flying felt a million miles away. Then came the sound that would change everything, a distant crash metal against trees. James jolted upright. "Stay here," he told Lila, grabbing his flashlight and coat. He ran into the storm. What he found shocked him. Tangled in the branches at the edge of the woods was a small plane, its fuselage split and smoking. Near the wreckage lay a woman, her flight suit soaked, one leg bleeding. James rushed to her side. "I'm not military," she said weakly. "Name's Avery Quinn, civilian test pilot. Lost control in the crosswind. Let's get you inside," James said. Over the next few days, James and Lila nursed Avery back to health. She was sharp, stubborn, and endlessly curious. Despite her injury, she insisted on helping around the house. Lila, starstruck, bombarded her with questions about flying. Avery answered every one about cockpits, cloud patterns, even barrel rolls. James noticed how Lila's eyes lit up in a way he hadn't seen since her mother passed. "She talks to you more than anyone," he said one night as they sat on the porch. Avery smiled. "She reminds me of myself as a kid, scrappy, curious, and wild about the sky." When Avery's team finally tracked her down, a black SUV arrived with her gear and a private nurse. But before leaving, she pulled James aside. "Let me help," she said. "Your daughter has something rarer, real pilot's heart." James frowned. "I appreciate that, but we can't afford fancy lessons." "I own a flight school," she said. "One of the best on the East Coast. I can sponsor her, full ride. And not because she's a charity case, because she deserves it." James stared at her, stunned. "She could go far," Avery added. "All I ask is that you let her try." 1 year later, under a crisp blue sky, Lila took her first solo flight in a trainer plane. James watched from the ground, heart pounding with pride. Standing beside him, Avery smiled. "Told you, she was born for this." The plane looped wide and steady over the hills, its silhouette cutting through the clouds like a promise. And James, the man who had nearly lost everything, realized that sometimes miracles don't come from the heavens. They crash land at your doorstep the night the storm hit. James Carter was hauling firewood through ankle-deep mud, his flannel shirt soaked and heavy. He glanced back at the dim light in his modest farmhouse where his daughter Lila waited inside, barefoot and singing to their aging Labrador. Boomer. Life hadn't been easy since his wife Alina passed away 2 years ago. She had been a flight instructor and a dreamer. He was the grounded one, literally and figuratively, working late shifts at a gas station and doing handyman jobs just to put food on the table. Now, everything he did was for their little girl. The radio crackled in the kitchen, warning of severe wind gusts and lightning. But just as James was about to go inside, a distant boom split the air. Far louder than thunder, it sounded like a crash. Grabbing his flashlight and rifle, James followed the sound, pushing through the woods behind his property. What he found was staggering. A small aircraft had torn through the treetops and lay half embedded in the forest floor. Smoke hissed from the nose, wings bent, debris scattered, and beside the wreckage was a pilot, barely conscious, trying to crawl. "Hey, don't move," James knelt beside her. Her helmet was cracked. Blood streamed from a gash on her brow. One leg was twisted badly, clearly broken. "I'm Avery," she murmured. "Test pilot. Emergency landing. Radio's fried. Okay, Avery, you're gonna be all right." Back at the farmhouse, Leela's eyes widened when her father carried in, a real-life pilot. While James cleaned and bandaged Avery's wounds, Leela fetched warm blankets and sat beside her with wide-eyed awe. "Did you really fly that plane?" she whispered. Avery managed a weak smile. "All the way from Tennessee. Didn't plan on landing in your woods, though." In the days that followed, Avery rested in their guest room, slowly regaining strength. She and Leela became inseparable. They watched old aviation documentaries together. Avery taught her how to read a flight map. Leela even dug out her mother's old flight goggles from a dusty trunk in the attic and showed them to her like sacred treasure. "She wants to fly more than anything," James confided one night. "And she should," Avery said. "That kind of fire shouldn't be wasted." James wanted to believe it, but reality said otherwise. He worked 3 jobs. His truck barely ran. Flight school, that was a fairy tale. One night, after Leela went to bed, Avery found him outside fixing a broken fence. "She's special, James," Avery said. "Not just talented, determined. That's rare." "I know," James said, wiping sweat from his brow. "But I can't give her the wings she needs." "What if I can?" He paused, confused. "I run a flight academy back east. Top tier. I've trained Air Force cadets, commercial pilots, even stunt flyers, and I've never seen a kid learn that fast." James didn't say anything. "I'll sponsor her," she continued. "Full tuition, lodging, books, everything." James looked away. "Why would you do that? Out of pity?" "No, because someone once gave me a shot when I had nothing. She reminds me of the girl I used to be before the sky saved me." Months later, the farm was quieter. Avery had returned to her life, but she kept in close contact. Then one day, a letter arrived. "Leela Carter has been officially accepted into the Quinn Aviation Academy's Youth Flight Program, with full scholarship. Classes begin this fall." James sat on the porch with the letter in his hands, heart in his throat. Leela jumped up and down, her sketch pad full of planes fluttering in the wind like wings, ready to take off. 1 year later, James stood at the edge of a small private airfield. The sun was rising behind the clouds. He watched as a small training aircraft taxied down the runway, its pilot seat occupied by none other than Leela. She was just 10 but calm, focused, and ready. "She's a natural," Avery said, walking up beside him in her flight jacket. James blinked away the tears. "She got it from her mother." "No," Avery said gently. "She got it from both of you." The plane lifted off, cutting cleanly through the sky. James felt his heart soar with it. For the first time in years, he didn't just feel proud, he felt hope, because the sky that once seemed out of reach was now home to his daughter's dreams. That evening, after watching Leela's first successful solo practice in a flight simulator, James and Avery sat by the fireplace again. He finally asked, "Why do you really care so much about helping her?" Avery was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "I grew up in foster care," she began. "Moved around every year. No real home. I was 12 when I saw a crop duster fly over our field, and I thought, that's it. That's freedom. But I had no money, no guidance, just this obsession with flying." "What changed?" James asked. "There was a mechanic at one of the foster homes. Vietnam vet, quiet. Everyone ignored him, but he noticed me sketching planes in my notebook. One day, he drove me to a private airfield and paid for my first lesson. Said it was an investment in skybound souls. That one lesson changed everything. That's why I'm here. That's why I help kids like Leela." James swallowed hard. "He sounds a lot like you." The closer it came to the day Leela would leave for the academy, the harder it became for James. He wrestled with questions in silence. Was he doing the right thing? Would she be safe? Was he pushing her into something he couldn't understand? One night Lila found him in the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at one of Elena's old aviation trophies. "I'm scared, Dad," she said softly, "but I want to go." James nodded. "I know, sweetheart. Me too. But your mom, she'd be so proud of you." Lila wrapped her arms around him. "I think she's still flying, just watching from higher up." The first day at Quinn Aviation Academy was surreal. Students in crisp uniforms, hangars filled with sleek planes, classrooms with flight simulators, and instructors in headsets. It was another world. James stayed long enough to help Lila unpack and kiss her goodbye. He noticed the way Avery gently knelt and spoke to Lila not as a child, but as a peer, a pilot. "Don't just learn the controls," Avery said. "Learn the sky, feel it in your bones. That's how real flyers are born." James left with a lump in his throat but peace in his heart. He knew now that Lila wasn't losing him. She was gaining herself, but it wasn't easy. There were days Lila wanted to quit. Her hands trembled during simulator tests. She struggled to memorize airspeed formulas and emergency landing protocols. And some older students mocked her, the scholarship farm kid. When she called home in tears, James told her something he'd never said before. "You're not doing this just for your mom anymore. You're doing it for you. You've got wings now, Lila. And it's okay if they shake a little. They're still strong enough to fly." The next day, she walked back into class with her chin up and her flight log in hand.